Yeah, I mean, I feel bad. You reach this point in your life where she loved to travel, so I'm sad that she can't do those things. But, you know, there's so much stuff on YouTube, the travel stuff, and we watch those things, and, you know, the animal shows, and real big with the flashcards.
Something is happening in Jay Leno's life, and almost no one is talking about it. For decades, he made millions laugh. But behind closed doors, things have quietly changed. Leno is now facing a reality more painful than any joke he's ever told. Then, in 2024, a court filing involving his wife, Mavis Leno, revealed the truth. A truth that didn't just change his life, but changed how the world sees him. And this story doesn't begin on a stage. It begins right there. Stopping for love. The final tragedy and the greatest turning point. On January 26, 2024, a quiet but significant piece of news emerged from the Los Angeles Superior Court. Jay Leno had filed a formal request to become the conservator for his wife of 45 years, Mavis Leno. This was not a legal battle over money or a dramatic family dispute. Instead, it was a preventative measure born from a painful reality. The court documents revealed that Mavis was struggling with advanced dementia. A doctor's report stated plainly that she often had no awareness of the current year or her physical location, a clear sign of her deteriorating cognitive state. After a series of hearings on April 9, 2024, a judge approved Jay's request. The conservatorship was officially established, but its purpose was not to control Mavis's assets. As Jay explained in his filings, the sole reason for this legal step was to set up a comprehensive estate plan. He needed the legal authority to ensure that Mavis would be cared for the rest of her life, especially in the event that he, her primary caregiver, passed away before she did. It was an act of profound, forward-thinking love, an attempt to build a protective wall around his wife that would stand even when he was no longer there to guard her himself. To grasp the full weight of this action, one must understand who Mavis is in Jay Leno's life. She has never been a typical Hollywood wife. Throughout their long marriage, which began on November 3, 1980, Mavis deliberately stayed out of the spotlight. She is a dedicated feminist and activist, an intelligent and fiercely independent woman who had once vowed she would never get married or have children. She first met Jay in the 1970s at the Comedy Store, back when he was a struggling young comedian who sometimes had to sleep in his 1955 Buick to make ends meet. She was drawn to his sharp wit, and he was captivated by her intellect and self-reliance. Their marriage became an island of stability in the turbulent ocean of show business. They chose not to have children and were never the subject of tabloid scandals. After Jay's parents and his only brother passed away over the years, Mavis became his last remaining fortress, the one person who connected him to a life beyond the stage and the cameras. She was there long before the fame and the fortune, and she was the person he always came home to after every show. Now, that fortress was beginning to crumble, not from an external attack, but from a silent enemy within. Dementia began to methodically erase the memories that had formed the foundation of their shared life. Her reality became a confusing and often distressing loop of forgotten moments. For Jay Leno, a man who had built a career on turning the day's events into sharp, observational humor, this was a new reality that could not be turned into a joke. His life, once dictated by television producers and tour managers, was now entirely reordered around Mavis's needs. In a rare and candid interview in early 2024, Jay described the new rhythm of their days. Every morning for nearly 3 years, a painful routine would unfold as Mavis woke up crying, consumed by a fresh wave of grief because, in her mind, her mother had just passed away. For her, that loss felt as raw and immediate as if it had happened only hours before. Each morning, Jay's first task was to sit beside her, hold her tightly, and wipe away her tears. He would then have to gently and patiently tell her the same story all over again, explaining that her mother had lived a long, full life and had passed away peacefully many years ago. He had to deliver this news as if it were the very first time. "She's not in any physical pain," Jay explained. "It's just a state of confusion. And I enjoy being with her." Some nights, the confusion would deepen. Mavis would look at the man lying next to her, the partner she had shared a life with for nearly half a century, and ask a simple yet heart-shattering question. "Who are you?" Jay never reacted with panic or frustration. He would simply smile, take her hand, and answer gently, "I'm Jay, the husband who fell in love with you at first sight at that comedy club all those years ago." He would try to take her back to the beginning of their story, hoping to anchor her to a familiar piece of their shared history. Well-meaning friends offered clumsy advice. "Why don't you find someone else? You still have a long life ahead of you," some suggested. Jay was stunned by the question. "I made a vow, in sickness and in health," he recounted. "Well, now we're in the sickness part, and we're still together." Someone even asked him directly if he planned to get a girlfriend, a question that made him laugh out of sheer disbelief. "I was shocked that someone would even ask that," he said. For him, Mavis was not a replaceable part of his life. She was the vow he intended to keep. His care for her extended far beyond comforting words. It was a daily commitment of physical actions. Jay, the man who once spent countless hours meticulously restoring complex car engines in his garage, now spent his time in the kitchen. He personally cooked all of Mavis's meals, making sure they were nutritious and easy for her to eat. He would patiently feed her when she struggled. He helped her get dressed. He would physically assist her in the bathroom. "She was always so independent," he shared. "Now I'm needed, and I like that. This isn't a job, this is love." He still tried to make her laugh, telling her old jokes and recounting funny stories from their early days together, always hoping to spark a flash of recognition in her eyes. Sometimes, a faint smile would appear. More often, she would just look at him with a distant gaze, lost in a world he could not enter. This transformation in Jay's life was absolute. In the past, his schedule was relentlessly packed. He filmed The Tonight Show 5 days a week, and on weekends, he would fly to Las Vegas or other cities for stand-up comedy performances, often doing over 150 shows a year. After all that, he would come home and work in his garage late into the night. Constant motion was his natural state. Now, that has all changed. His priority is to be home every evening. He has drastically reduced the number of long-distance shows and has turned down numerous lucrative offers. The car garage, once his sanctuary, now has to wait. His primary focus is Mavis. "I like taking care of her," he stated simply. "I enjoy her company." This is the first and only time in his life that Jay Leno has truly stopped. He didn't stop when he suffered third-degree burns. He didn't stop when he broke multiple bones. He didn't stop when he was publicly criticized by the media and his peers. But he stopped for Mavis. His lifelong philosophy of keep moving had carried him over every other obstacle. But it proved useless against the slow, painful process of losing the person he loved most. Speed could not help him outrun this reality. Work could not fill this void. This time, the solution was not to move faster, but to stand perfectly still, to be present, and to love. But to understand why this act of stopping is so profound and meaningful, we must first understand the philosophy that drove him through everything that came before. Keep moving. The foundation of Jay Leno's life. Jay Leno's philosophy of keep moving was not a catchy slogan invented by a publicist. It was forged in the fires of a difficult childhood in Andover, Massachusetts. He was born with severe dyslexia, a learning disorder that, in the 1950s and 60s, was poorly understood. In the classroom, he struggled to keep up as letters and words seemed to dance chaotically on the page, turning the simple act of reading into an exhausting battle. His teachers, lacking the knowledge to help him, were quick to label him. A guidance counselor once told his parents directly, "Your son will never go to college. He's simply not smart enough." His classmates were no kinder, often calling him stupid. This, combined with his distinctive appearance, particularly a prominent jaw that would later become his trademark, made him feel like an outsider. It was in this challenging environment that his mother, Catherine Leno, a pragmatic and resilient Scottish immigrant, gave him the guiding principle for his life. She did not shield him with pity. Instead, she told him a hard truth. You have to work twice as hard as everyone else to get what they have. She instilled in him a simple but unbreakable rule. If you don't work, you don't eat. These words became deeply ingrained in Jay's mind. He understood that he could not compete through traditional academic channels, so he had to find another way. He found it in humor. Making people laugh became his survival mechanism. If he couldn't be the smartest kid in the room, he could be the funniest. He used jokes to deflect attention from his academic weaknesses, to connect with others, and, most importantly, to prove his own worth. The deep-seated insecurity from his childhood fueled a relentless, insatiable work ethic. He threw himself into work, not for money or fame, but for a sense of security and validation. He needed to prove to his old teachers, to his childhood peers, and to himself that he was not a failure. When he decided to pursue a career in comedy, he applied the keep moving philosophy with absolute dedication. After moving to Los Angeles, his early years were a testament to his tireless drive. He saved money on rent by sleeping in his 1955 Buick Roadmaster behind comedy clubs. He would drive hundreds of miles between cities just for a 15-minute slot on stage. He was willing to perform anywhere, from bars and strip clubs to prisons. He famously performed multiple sets in a single night, racing from the Comedy Store to the Improv, and then to a smaller club in the San Fernando Valley. While other comedians were socializing after their shows, Jay was already on the road to the next one. He didn't drink or do drugs. All of his energy was channeled into his work. Even after he became a household name as a regular guest on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, he maintained his grueling stand-up schedule. He believed that live performance was the only way to keep his comedic skills sharp. He never allowed himself to become complacent. When he finally took over The Tonight Show in 1992, his work ethic became legendary in the industry. He was always the first person to arrive at the studio and the last to leave. He personally wrote most of the jokes for his opening monologue, reading dozens of newspapers every day to find material. He lived by a simple motto: consistency beats talent. He might not have been the most intellectual or cutting-edge comedian, but he was determined to be the hardest-working one. For Jay, work was more than a way to make a living. It was his identity. It was where he felt competent, in control, and safe. The stage and the garage were his kingdoms. In those places, no one could call him stupid. In those places, the outcome depended solely on his own effort. The keep-moving philosophy helped him build an empire, but it also turned him into a man who did not know how to stop. And life would repeatedly test that philosophy with ever greater obstacles. Obstacles on the path of constant motion. Jay Leno's keep moving philosophy was not just a recipe for success, but also a defense mechanism, a shield he used to push through every crisis. From professional controversies and personal losses to devastating physical injuries, he faced every challenge in the same way. He put his head down, worked even harder, and never, ever stopped. His career, while immensely successful, was marked by two major controversies over the coveted hosting chair of The Tonight Show. Both times, he was cast as the villain by the public and the media. When the legendary Johnny Carson announced his retirement in 1992, the television world widely assumed that David Letterman, whose show followed Carson's, would be the natural successor. Letterman was seen as the cooler, more innovative choice. However, the network, NBC, shocked everyone by choosing Leno. This decision ignited one of the most famous feuds in television history. Leno was shunned by many in the comedy community and labeled in the press as a backstabbing opportunist who had schemed to steal a job that rightfully belonged to Letterman. Leno's response to this firestorm was to ignore it and go to work. He did not engage in public arguments or try to defend himself in interviews. Every night at 11:35 p.m., he walked onto the stage, smiled, and delivered his monologue. He simply worked harder, making his show more accessible to a mainstream audience. Through sheer persistence, he eventually won the ratings war against Letterman. He just kept moving until the storm passed. History repeated itself in 2010. As part of a long-standing agreement, Leno stepped down from The Tonight Show to make way for Conan O'Brien. NBC gave Leno a new show in an earlier time slot, but it failed in the ratings. In a panic, the network proposed moving Leno back to his old time slot, which would have pushed Conan's Tonight Show to after midnight. Conan refused and left the network in a bitter public dispute. Once again, the public turned on Leno, accusing him of selfishly sabotaging a colleague's career to reclaim his old job. Yet again, his reaction was the same. He walked onto the stage every night, even incorporating the criticism into his jokes. He didn't hide, he just kept working, confident that time and consistency would vindicate him. While his professional battles were public, his personal losses were quiet tragedies. He dealt with them using the same coping mechanism: work. In 1993, just a year into his Tonight Show tenure, his father, Angelo, passed away. A year later, in 1994, his mother, Catherine, the woman who taught him the value of work, also died. Losing both parents in such a short time was a devastating blow, but his television audience barely noticed. Leno took only a few days off before returning to the studio. Comedy became his refuge, a way to keep the overwhelming grief at bay. In 2002, his older brother, Patrick, died of cancer. Again, Jay sought solace in his relentless work schedule. He kept moving because to stop would mean confronting the profound emptiness left behind. In more recent years, his own body became the source of his greatest challenges. His philosophy was put to the ultimate test by a series of horrific accidents. In November 2022, while working on a vintage car, a fuel line leak sprayed gasoline on his face just as a spark ignited it. He suffered severe second- and third-degree burns to his face, chest, and hands, requiring skin grafts and a 10-day hospital stay. Incredibly, just 2 weeks after being released, he was back on stage, turning the traumatic experience into a comedy routine. Only 2 months later, in January 2023, He was knocked off his 1940 Indian motorcycle by an unmarked wire, resulting in a broken collarbone, 2 broken ribs, and 2 cracked kneecaps. Once again, he downplayed the injuries and returned to work as soon as he could. Then came the fall in 2024, which left his face bruised and his wrist in a brace. After each incident, his message was the same. The body is giving me a warning, but I'm still functional. He refused to be stopped by physical pain. Through public scorn, personal grief, and brutal injuries, Jay Leno proved that he was a perpetual motion machine until he finally faced a crisis that work and speed could not solve. Jay Leno still performs. He still walks onto the stage at the Comedy and Magic Club every Sunday night and tells jokes about politics and modern life. But a fundamental shift has occurred. The center of Jay Leno's universe has moved. It is no longer the brightly lit stage or the garage filled with polished steel and chrome. The center is now his quiet home, and the woman who has been by his side for 45 years. His focus has shifted from cross-country tours to home-cooked meals, from the roar of an engine to the quiet act of wiping away a tear. The keep moving philosophy served him well for most of his life. It helped a boy with dyslexia become the king of late-night television. It powered him through public criticism, private sorrow, and incredible physical pain. Fame, fortune, and speed helped him overcome countless tragedies. But they were powerless against the final and greatest challenge of his life. Only love had the strength to make a man who never stopped finally learn how to stand still. Caring for Mavis is not a burden he endures. It is a privilege he cherishes. In his own words, one can sense that he sees this as the most important purpose of his life now. "I've been lucky my whole life," he said. "Now I get to be with her." These are not the words of a man who feels trapped, but of a man who has found a new and profound meaning in his life. Jay Leno spent a lifetime making millions of people laugh. Today, he stands quietly in his home, far from the applause and the spotlight, to hold his wife when she cries over a sorrow she can't remember, to cook her a meal, and to hold the hand of the woman he promised to be with, in sickness and in health. This may be the most meaningful and heroic role in a life that was once defined by nothing but relentless forward motion.